after that we have David Delana and Curtis Welch, right? 26? Awesome. Okay, so then we have Vaughn Edgewiler and Matt Lee, who's going first. Matt?
No, Vaughn's going first.
Vaughn's going
Here's
first.
your son.
Messing with me?
He's messing.
Yes.
She got a second set of questions for messing with me.
All right, so this is the infamous Matthew Lee. The Supreme Leader. Okay, so Matt. Yes, I did say that. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to ask you some questions.
Okay.
If you could be an Olympic athlete, which sport would you participate in and why?
Well, I struggle with that question. I would have to go, I think I'm going to give it into and say wrestling, Greco-Roman wrestling, because that was high school for me and I kind of followed it my whole life. But on the other hand, playing golf in the Olympics would then translate to playing golf for a living afterwards, so that was a close second.
There's some endorsements for the golfing.
Yeah, golfing is much more lucrative than Greco-Roman wrestling.
Okay, so if you could invite 3 famous people to dinner, who would they be and why? I think this is appropriate because I know you like to cook.
Yes. First would be, I'm going to skip Jesus. The first would be Giovanni de' Medici, who was ruler in Florence during the Renaissance, so all the art, he was the patron, he basically paid for it all. Lorenzo and Giovanni and anyway, that's one. Second, Lord, I had this on the drive-in. Second was good Lord, I forget. Well, it's terrible too because the third person is my mother. And the reason it was my mother is because the other two, while they sounded really interesting to me, the reason I was interested in them is because my mother sent, she toured Italy and ranted and raved about Florence and got me interested in it. So pick somebody else. I forget. I'm sorry. Go
Let's
ahead.
go with JC.
Tony Soprano.
All right, okay, if you could learn any skill, what would it be and why?
I wasn't ready for that one. Any skill. I'm happy with what I got.
Underwater basket weaving.
There
Awesome.
we go.
How long have you been doing the whole event?
Sure. I started in December of 02 and closed my first loan in January of 03.
And then your newest puppy's name is what? What kind is she?
Luna. She's an Australian catalog. She is a piece of work. She's 14 weeks. She's a tug dog. My other dog is a fetch dog. So I can't exercise them both at the same time or get them to tug against each other. So they're an extra hour a day. But she's just absolutely awesome.
Last question. If you could only eat meatloaf for every meal,
Sure.
or listen to meatloaf for the rest of your
Sure.
life.
I like to cook and eat so much that I've got to go with listen to meatloaf
Listen to Meatloaf?
until I stick pencils in my ears. So I'm not
You
listening to it.
have to eat. You don't have to listen to music.
It's been a while since I did a basic kind of qualification for self-employed people scenario. So I thought today I'd go through what some of the misconceptions are in the industry and the bare minimums for qualification for a mortgage. I'm going to give you some rundown. It's not impossible, in spite of what that says, to get credit in this marketplace. It is hard, but basically you just have to prove what your situation is. We look at 3 things. We look at credit, collateral, and character, the 3 C's of mortgage lending. Credit is basically what's your score. But here are the disqualifiers. With all the stuff I'm going to say, there are only 3 things that really eliminate you from being able to buy a mortgage for a specific period of time. One of them is a foreclosure. That's 3 years from the sale date. So whenever the judge bangs the gavel and the ownership changes hands, 3 years and a day from that point you can go under contract on a new house. The second one is bankruptcy, 2 years from the discharge. You can actually buy a house while you're in a restructure bankruptcy. If the judge approves it and you've made your payments for a year, you can buy a house while you're in bankruptcy. If it's a walk-away bankruptcy, then it's 24 months and a day. And then the last one is a short sale, 0 to 3 years, depending on where you've been current or not. If you have specific questions about these, feel free to touch base. So credit, what's the minimum? Well, the minimum is really, the question is, are you current or can you get current on your bills? If you can answer that question with yes, you can probably buy a house from a credit standpoint. If you're late and it's medicals, the question's going to be how old are the problems? We can get around medical bills, but we can't get around the score that comes in. If it's aged off a little bit and your scores have come back up in above 600, you can buy a house. Typically, credit scores run between 550 and 750. Theoretically, they go between 450 and 850. 600 is pretty bruised. It's, collections and paid charge-offs and things like that. So credit scores are really driven by, are you current or can you get current? That's the minimum. Collateral. What kind of house? If you want to buy a farm, something with a 16-car garage, something that's a condo with the first floor is a working museum, you're going to have some difficulty. But if you want a stock standard home or townhouse, all these rules apply. A condo's a little different. It's a little tougher, but not dramatically. Really, townhouse or house, all these rules are going to fall in place. Down payment, yes, 0% is still possible. You don't have to have 20% down. 3.5 is the target you should be looking for best loan. You can put more down, great, your loan gets better, but not dramatically better, as we'll see in a minute. Finally, the down payment source. I've had clients borrow against 401ks. I've had clients sell cars. I've had clients get gifts from their parents. You can get loans from your parents now because everybody realized that gifts from parents were usually really just loans. You can use those at this point. So if you've got somebody who's willing to help you or support you, or you know somebody who you're willing to help or support with a little bit of a down payment, they can move into a house. The last one is character. This is usually where loans fall apart. It's got to be provable. According to the law, I can't take your word for anything. It's got to come from the IRS or it's got to come from your employer. So typically we're looking for 2 years of continuous employment in the same industry. W-2, we can use the income right off your pay stub. Self-employed, we're looking at 2 years tax returns. Since I can't take your word for it, I have to get it back from the IRS. So if you filed an extension and it's October of 2015, I get to count none of your 2015 income and none of your 2014 income. We're working on 12 and 13 taxes, right? 14 can hurt you, it can't help you. You can't get more unless you file your taxes. We have to wait for the IRS to process it. We have to get it back from them because we're not allowed to take your word for it. We're not allowed to take your CPA's word for it. So that's really where the struggles come in getting qualified. Self-employed is defined as owning more than 25% of your company. If your spouse owns 76% of your company, you are not self-employed, you're paycheck. Still got to look at tax returns, but it's a whole lot easier. Second, commissions, bonus, overtime, income, we're looking at 2 years track record there. So if you've gotten overtime or bonuses for a year, I can't use any of it. Right? You can use it to make yourself feel comfortable, to buy more house, but to qualify, I can't use any of it. For W-2 employees, I can usually qualify you for more than you want. I can qualify for your payment, you go, well, I don't want anything that big. For self-employed people, I can usually qualify you for less than you want because you're qualifying on 2 years ago's income. Does that make sense? All right. Last one is, we changed some of this with with write-offs and exceptions. So for instance, things that don't really have an ongoing impact in your income, like depreciation, businesses you've closed, we get to add those back in. Car expenses, I get to put about half of it back in, call it income, because you didn't really spend 55 cents a mile, you just wrote off 55 cents a mile, right? The reverse is true for meals and entertainment. You only get to write off half of that, so I got to double that. This is why so many mortgage lenders make mistakes on self-employed income, because there's a lot of moving parts. But it only takes about an hour to go through a couple of tax returns and figure out exactly how much you qualify for. So if you think you might be there, give me a shout. I'll be happy to look things over for you. So what does it look like? All right, I had a client recently, 620 credit score, 3.5% down payment is a gift. That's about $9 grand. Bankruptcy 28 months ago. $250,000 home, and we're spending almost half of their gross monthly income on debt. So if they're making $4 grand, they had $2,000 worth of payment. Now, why was I comfortable with this? Because they had a spouse that wasn't on the loan. Right? I knew they could make the payments. I was comfortable with it. This was the qualifying. Up to half of your gross income taken out by debt. The result, they got 4% as a rate, with a credit back to cover some of their closing costs. They put $9,000 in, and it was a gift, and their payment is $1,500. This is a person who came to me and said, there's no way I can qualify for a house. I just had a bankruptcy. I don't have any money. They were paying $1,800 in rent. Right? So the marketplace seems to have this image that people can't get a house. Is it a struggle? In some cases, but usually the only difference is going to be that I'm going to say yes to you for less than you wanted. If you're self-employed, I might say yes to you, but you only qualify for $150,000 and you want $260,000. Can't help you there. That's the way the math works, but I can put you on a plan where you can look at next year and next year's taxes and debt restructure and debt pay down to get into where this makes sense again. But at least you get the honesty, because it's not as bad as everybody says it is. Right? How much more time do I have left?
Sorry, you're done.
All right, so I guess no questions then. If you have questions, bring them to me after. Happy to hammer this stuff out. I live, breathe, and eat this, and I get to help a lot of people. Sometimes I get paid for it because they buy a house, and sometimes I don't, and that's completely okay. So reach out to me with any questions you have. Thanks. Relax.
Hard part's done.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn. Okay, so Vaughn, you're up next. There he is. What?
I'm on board. I'm on.
All right, so, on as well, heating and air conditioning. Sure, that's cold. All right, so, Vaughn,
Yeah.
would you rather be invisible or able to read minds?
So as a service guy, you kind of become invisible over the years. You just kind of expect you to go and get by. So I'd much rather read minds because I really want to know what you're thinking right now.
Okay, it's not nearly as fun as you might think. Okay, of all the places you've lived or visited, which do you like best and why?
Actually, my favorite place I've ever been was Savannah, Georgia. Yeah, there's just all kinds of crazy little bugs flying everywhere. There's ghosts, snowies, just humidity. I loved it.
Nice. You like humidity.
I do.
You're in the wrong state.
I
Okay, do you have any hidden talents